Hi, I'm Valentina. 6 years ago, my sister Celeste destroyed my prom night for her boyfriend Kieran, and my entire family watched it happen. She told everyone I was too selfish to understand true love, and they all nodded like it was gospel truth. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a tantrum. I just walked out of that hotel ballroom in my ruined dress, mascara streaming down my face, with nothing but my dignity and a promise to myself that this would never happen again. But this morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 unread messages. Now Kieran, the same Kieran who helped humiliate me that night, is begging for a meeting because apparently I'm his new regional director. So what changed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was May 15, 2018, at the Grandview Ballroom in Millhaven. The kind of place that tries too hard with crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed everything, but somehow still manages to feel magical when you're 17, and wearing the dress you saved up for all year. I'd been planning this night since freshman year. Not just the dress, though that powder blue silk number with the beaded bodice had cost me 6 months of weekend shifts at Rosetti's Deli. But everything. The hair appointment I'd booked 3 weeks in advance. The shoes I'd practiced walking in until my feet were covered in blisters. Even the tiny pearl earrings that belonged to my grandmother, the only person in my family who ever really listened to me. See, prom wasn't just about the party for me. It was about Tyler Nakamura, this quiet, brilliant guy from my AP chemistry class, who'd finally asked me after months of study sessions that felt more like dates. Tyler, who brought me coffee with 2 sugars every Tuesday morning. Tyler, who stayed after school to help me with calculus even though he was already 3 chapters ahead. Tyler, who'd nervously stumbled through asking me to prom while we were balancing equations, his hands shaking so hard he spilled sodium chloride all over his lab notes. For once in my life I felt chosen, not as backup, not as the responsible one cleaning up someone else's mess, just chosen. My sister Celeste had other plans. Celeste was 19, technically an adult, but still living at home and dating Kieran Whitmore, this 22-year-old wannabe influencer who thought community college was beneath him but had no problem asking dad for gas money every week. Kieran had that specific type of confidence that comes from never being told no by parents who mistake mediocrity for potential. Sandy brown hair always perfectly tousled, designer knockoffs he wore like they were the real thing, and this habit of talking over everyone in the room while contributing absolutely nothing meaningful to any conversation. But Celeste was obsessed, had been since they started dating 8 months earlier. She'd literally rearranged her work schedule at the boutique to match his random availability. She'd stopped hanging out with her friends because Kieran thought they were too dramatic. She'd even switched her major from nursing to communications because he said they could build something together in social media marketing. Our parents, Dimitri and Rosalind, ate it up. They called it romantic. I called it pathetic. The morning of prom, everything seemed perfect. I'd gotten my hair done at Luxe Salon, soft waves with tiny braids woven through, exactly like the photo I'd shown Marietta, the stylist. My makeup was flawless, thanks to a YouTube tutorial I'd practiced 12 times. The dress fit like it was custom-made, which technically it was since I'd spent 3 afternoons with Mrs. Chen at the alterations shop making sure every seam was perfect. I was in my room doing final touch-ups when I heard raised voices downstairs. Not unusual in our house. Celeste had been dramatic since birth, but something about the tone made me pause. I crept to the top of the stairs, my satin heels silent on the hardwood. "Can't believe you'd be so selfish." Celeste's voice was pitched high, that particular frequency she hit when she wanted sympathy. "This is my future we're talking about." "Sweetheart, what exactly are you asking us to do?" Mom's voice, careful and measured. The tone she used when she was already planning to give in, but wanted to seem reasonable. "Tyler works at his dad's catering company, right? The one doing the prom setup? Kieran knows someone who could get him fired from that job if Tyler doesn't back off from certain people." My blood went cold. Tyler's weekend job at Nakamura Catering wasn't just spending money. His family needed that income. His mom had been laid off from the textile factory 6 months ago, and his dad's catering business was barely staying afloat. "What people?" Dad asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Valentina." Celeste spat my name like it tasted bitter. "Tyler's completely obsessed with her, and it's ruining everything between me and Kieran. Kieran says Tyler won't shut up about her at work, and it's making Kieran look bad because everyone knows they're sisters. It's humiliating." I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. Kieran worked part-time at the same marketing firm where Tyler did data entry twice a week. I'd never known they interacted at all. "So you want us to?" Mom's voice trailed off. "Just talk to her. Make her understand that sometimes we have to sacrifice for family. She's 17. She'll have other proms. But Kieran and I are talking about our future. Real future. Not some high school fantasy." The silence stretched so long I thought maybe sanity had prevailed. Then I heard Dad clear his throat. "She does get pretty focused on herself sometimes," he said slowly. "And Tyler's a nice enough kid, but maybe it would be better if she learned early that sometimes family comes first." My heart shattered so quietly I'm surprised the pieces didn't echo down the stairs. "Thank you," Celeste whispered, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I knew you'd understand. I just need her to call Tyler and tell him she's not feeling well, that she can't go tonight. Just this once. Kieran promised if Tyler stays home, he'll introduce me to his cousin who works at that marketing firm in the city. The good one. This could change everything for me." I stood there in my perfect dress, listening to my family plan my heartbreak like it was a grocery list. And for the first time in my 17 years, I realized I was completely alone in that house. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I didn't go back to my room. Instead, I sat on those stairs in my perfect dress, listening to my family orchestrate my humiliation like it was some kind of strategic board meeting. The beading on my bodice caught the light from the hallway chandelier, creating tiny rainbows on the wall that felt like mockery now. 20 minutes later, Mom appeared at the bottom of the staircase. She looked up at me with that smile she reserved for delivering bad news, soft around the edges but firm in the middle, like a marshmallow wrapped around a stone. "Valentina, sweetheart, come down here. We need to talk." I descended slowly, each step deliberate. My grandmother's pearl earrings felt heavy against my neck, like they were weighing me down with the memory of someone who actually cared about my happiness. The living room felt different when I walked in. Celeste sat curled up in Dad's leather recliner, her eyes red-rimmed but victorious. She was wearing this soft pink sundress that made her look younger, more innocent. Dad stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back like he was delivering a corporate presentation. Mom positioned herself on the couch, patting the cushion beside her. "Sit down, honey." I remained standing. Something about the way they were all arranged, like a tribunal, made me want to keep my height advantage. "Valentina," Dad began, his voice taking on that careful tone he used during teaching moments. "Sometimes in families we have to make sacrifices for each other. That's what love looks like." "What kind of sacrifice?" I asked, though I already knew. Celeste leaned forward, her voice soft and wounded. "I know this is going to sound unfair, but Tyler's been saying some really inappropriate things about you at work. It's making Kieran uncomfortable and it's affecting his reputation at the marketing firm." I blinked. "What kind of things?" "Just obsessive things. Like how he thinks about you constantly. How he's planning your whole future together after one date. Kieran says it's getting weird, and his supervisor is starting to notice." The lie was so smooth, so perfectly delivered, that for a split second I almost believed it. Almost. "So you want me to—" "Just stay home tonight," Mom interjected quickly. "Tell Tyler you're not feeling well. Give him some space to clear his head. Sometimes teenage boys get too intense, too fast, and it's kinder to pump the brakes before someone gets hurt. I looked around the room, at Celeste, who was staring at me with wide, pleading eyes. At Dad, who was nodding like this, made perfect sense. At Mom, who was already reaching for her phone, probably to call Tyler's mother with some story about food poisoning. And if I don't? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dad's jaw tightened. Valentina, Tyler's family is struggling financially. His job at the catering company is important to them. It would be a real shame if something happened to jeopardize that income stream. There it was. The threat, wrapped in concern and delivered with a smile. You're asking me to break my prom date so that Celeste's boyfriend can get her a job through his cousin. We're asking you to think about family first, Mom said firmly. Prom is one night. Celeste's career could last a lifetime. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, not yet, but definitely crack. Like ice on a pond when the temperature starts to rise. What if I call Tyler right now and ask him about these inappropriate things he supposedly said? Celeste's face went pale. You can't do that. It would just embarrass him, and Kieran would get in trouble for telling me. Convenient. Valentina Marie Patterson. Dad's voice went sharp, using my full name like a weapon. You're 17 years old. You live in our house, eat our food, and wear clothes we bought. You're gonna call Tyler right now and tell him you can't go tonight. End of discussion. The crack in my chest split wider. I looked at each of them, really looked. Celeste, triumphant and teary-eyed. Mom, already dialing a number. Dad, arms crossed, waiting for my compliance. And then I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you finally see the magic trick for what it is. Just sleight of hand and misdirection. The kind that bubbles up when you realize you've been the only one playing by the rules in a game where everyone else is cheating. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Excuse me? Dad stepped closer. I said no, I'm not calling Tyler. I'm not canceling prom. And I'm not sacrificing my happiness so Celeste can manipulate her way into a job she's not qualified for. Celeste gasped like I'd slapped her. I can't believe you're being so selfish. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You never think about anyone but yourself. Really? Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one in this room who isn't thinking about myself. You want me to hurt Tyler's feelings and ruin my prom night so your boyfriend can play hero to his cousin. Mom and Dad want me to fall in line so they don't have to deal with your dramatics. Everyone gets what they want except me. That's enough. Mom stood up, her phone forgotten on the couch. You're going upstairs right now to call Tyler, or you're not going anywhere tonight. I looked down at my dress, 6 months of Deli shifts, perfectly fitted, chosen with such hope. Then I looked back at my family. Fine, I'll call Tyler. Relief flooded all 3 faces. I pulled out my phone, found Tyler's number, and hit call. It rang twice before his voice came through, warm and excited. Valentina! Perfect timing. I was just leaving to pick up the corsage. White roses with baby's breath, just like you said. My throat felt tight, but I kept my voice steady. Tyler, I need to tell you something. The room went silent. Celeste leaned forward. Mom smiled approvingly. Dad nodded once. I'm going to be about 20 minutes late, I continued. I need to stop by the drugstore and pick up some tissues, because I have a feeling I'm going to need them tonight. Tyler chuckled. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. See you soon? I hung up and looked at my family. There, I called him. The silence stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Valentina. Dad's voice was deadly quiet. You have exactly 60 seconds to call him back and cancel, or I'm calling his father myself. I met his eyes, and for the first time in my 17 years, I didn't look away first. Then you'd better start dialing. I walked to the front door, grabbed my small beaded purse from the hall table, and opened it. The spring air hit my face, carrying the scent of jasmine from Mrs. Rodriguez's garden next door. Behind me, I heard Dad's voice, already dialing. "Yes, Mr. Nakamura? This is Dimitri Patterson, Valentina's father. We need to talk." I closed the door and started walking toward downtown Millhaven, my heels clicking against the sidewalk like a countdown timer. My phone was already buzzing with an incoming call. Tyler, probably confused and heartbroken. I didn't answer, not yet. First, I needed to figure out how to explain that my own family had just declared war on my happiness, and I was the only soldier on my side. I made it 3 blocks before my phone stopped buzzing. The silence felt worse than the constant ringing had. I knew what that meant. Tyler had gotten the call. Whatever lie my father had told Mr. Nakamura had worked, and now Tyler thought I was exactly the kind of person who would abandon someone an hour before prom without explanation. The Millhaven town square stretched out in front of me, all manicured flower beds and wrought iron benches that looked charming in tourism brochures but felt cold when you needed somewhere to sit and think. I chose the bench facing away from Rosetti's Deli, where I'd worked every weekend for the past 8 months. The last thing I needed was Mr. Rosetti seeing me in my prom dress at 7:30 on a Saturday night, alone and clearly not at any dance. My purse contained exactly $37, my student ID, and a tube of lipstick I'd bought specifically to touch up between dinner and dancing. Not exactly the resources you need to disappear from your life, but it would have to do. The first text came at 7:45. "Tyler, I don't understand what happened. Your dad said you never wanted to go with me, that you felt pressured. I thought we were friends at least. I'm confused." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Of course, Dad had made it about pressure. Of course, he'd twisted it to make Tyler feel like some kind of predator, instead of the sweet, nervous boy who'd brought me coffee every Tuesday morning for 3 months before finally asking me out. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could fix this. I could call Tyler right now, explain everything, tell him the truth about what my family had done. We could still salvage the night. Show up to prom an hour late, sure, but together. Then I remembered the look on Dad's face when he'd picked up the phone. The way he'd said Tyler's father's name like he was calling in a favor rather than ruining a teenager's evening. The casual cruelty of it, delivered with the same tone he used to discuss quarterly sales reports at his insurance firm. If I dragged Tyler back into this mess, what would happen to his job? Dad wasn't bluffing. He never bluffed. He had connections all over Millhaven's small business community, and the Nakamura family couldn't afford to lose that catering income. Tyler's mom, Keiko, had been out of work since November when the textile factory closed. His dad was working 18-hour days just to keep the catering business afloat. I couldn't ask Tyler to risk his family's livelihood for one night of dancing. But I also couldn't let him think I'd just used him and thrown him away. "Valentina, Tyler, everything my dad told you was a lie. I wanted to go with you tonight more than anything, but my family threatened your father's business if I did. I'm so sorry. You deserve the truth, even if I can't fix it." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came back in less than a minute. "Tyler, what are you talking about? What business threat?" "Valentina, it's complicated. Just know that none of this was your fault, and you didn't do anything wrong. I hope someday I can explain properly." "Tyler, Valentina, where are you? I'm coming to get you." "Valentina, please don't. It will only make things worse for your family. I'm okay." I turned off my phone before he could respond. The sun was setting behind the old courthouse, painting everything in shades of gold and amber that should have been beautiful but just felt like a mockery of what this evening was supposed to look like. Somewhere across town, my classmates were taking pictures in hotel lobbies and posting them to social media with captions about best friends and magical nights. Somewhere else, Tyler was probably sitting in his car in a rented tuxedo, trying to understand how his prom date had evaporated an hour before dinner. And somewhere in my house, Celeste was probably already texting Kieran about how she'd, quote, handled the Tyler situation. I stood up from the bench, my dress rustling against my legs. The beading caught the last rays of sunlight, sending tiny sparkles across the sidewalk. 6 months of weekend shifts, and it was still the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned. It seemed wrong to waste it sitting on a bench feeling sorry for myself. The Grandview Ballroom was only 4 blocks away. I could hear the faint sound of music drifting from the direction of the hotel district, probably the DJ doing sound checks, getting ready for the arrival of couples who'd spent weeks planning their perfect night. I started walking toward the music. Not because I was going to crash my own prom, not because I had some fantasy about walking in alone and showing everyone how strong I was, but because I needed to see it. I needed to witness what I was giving up, what my family had cost me, so I could remember this feeling, so I could carry it with me and never forget how it felt to be sacrificed for someone else's convenience. The Grandview Hotel sat on Millhaven's main street like a dowager empress, all columns and marble steps and crystal windows that reflected the streetlights in patterns that looked like stars. The ballroom was on the 2nd floor, and from the sidewalk I could see the golden glow spilling out onto the hotel's wraparound balcony. A group of juniors was gathered on the front steps, taking photos with their dates. Amanda Chen in emerald green, laughing at something her boyfriend whispered in her ear. Marcus Rivera looking uncomfortable in his bow tie but smiling anyway. Sarah Beth Collins, who'd been planning her prom look since freshman year, posing like she was on a red carpet. I recognized all of them from AP classes, student council meetings, chemistry labs. We weren't close friends, but we were friendly. Under normal circumstances, I would have walked up those steps with Tyler, posed for photos with the group, compared corsages, and complained about how the boys had no idea how to pin them on properly. Instead, I stood across the street like a ghost, watching my life happen without me. Valentina? I turned around, and there was Mrs. Nakamura, Tyler's mother. She was coming out of the corner pharmacy with a small white bag, wearing her weekend clothes, and looking tired in the way that people do when they've been working multiple jobs for months. My stomach dropped to my shoes. "Hello, Mrs. Nakamura?" She looked me up and down, taking in the dress, the hair, the makeup, the fact that I was standing alone on a street corner instead of dancing in a ballroom. "You look beautiful, sweetheart, but shouldn't you be at prom?" The kindness in her voice almost broke me. Tyler had gotten his gentleness from her, the same soft-spoken consideration, the same way of making you feel heard without having to raise your voice to compete for attention. "There was a change of plans," I said carefully. She studied my face for a long moment. "Tyler came home an hour ago. He was very upset. He said your father called and said you'd never really wanted to go with him." I closed my eyes. "Mrs. Nakamura, But that doesn't make sense to me," she continued quietly, "because Tyler's been talking about tonight for weeks, and he's a good judge of character. If he thought you wanted to go with him, then you probably did." I opened my eyes. She was looking at me with the same expression Tyler got when he was working through a difficult chemistry problem. Focused, patient, determined to understand. "Sometimes families make choices for us," I said finally, "even when those choices hurt." She nodded slowly. "My family made choices for me once too, when I was about your age. I thought they knew better than I did." She shifted the pharmacy bag to her other hand. "I was wrong. They knew what was easier for them. That's not the same thing." We stood there in comfortable silence, two people who understood something about sacrifice that we shouldn't have had to learn so young. "Tyler's a good boy," she said eventually. "I know, that's why I couldn't let him get hurt worse than he already has been." She smiled sadly. "You're protecting him. Someone has to." Mrs. Nakamura reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "This is my cousin's restaurant in Sacramento. She's always looking for good people who understand what hard work means. If you ever decide you've had enough of families making choices for you, you call her." I took the card. "Thank you. Take care of yourself, Valentina. And remember, you're 17, not 70. You have time to build a life where your choices matter." She walked away, leaving me alone with a business card that felt like a lifeline, and the sound of music drifting from a ballroom where I should have been dancing. I looked up at those golden windows one more time, memorizing the light and the laughter and the life I was walking away from. Then I turned and headed home, my heels clicking against the sidewalk like a countdown to whatever came next. The house was dark when I got home, except for the blue glow of the television in the living room. I could hear the familiar sounds of Dad's Saturday night routine, some detective show where the dialogue was always too quiet and the gunshots were always too loud. Mom would be in the kitchen doing her weekly meal prep, humming along to whatever playlist she'd discovered that week on Spotify. Normal family sounds. Like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just blown up my life 2 hours ago for the sake of Celeste's boyfriend's career prospects. I slipped off my heels at the front door, the marble entryway cold against my feet. The house smelled like Mom's lavender candles and the pot roast she'd made for dinner, scents that usually meant comfort and home, but now felt like a lie wrapped in familiarity. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed toward my room, my dress whispering against the banister. I was almost to the top when I heard Celeste's voice drifting from her bedroom, bright and animated in the way it got when she was talking to Kieran. I know, right? I was so worried she'd make a huge scene, but she actually handled it pretty maturely. Maybe she's finally growing up. I stopped, my hand frozen on the banister rail. "Tyler who? Oh, you mean the catering boy. Yeah, he seemed pretty upset when his dad called him home, but honestly, Kieran, he'll get over it. Boys that age bounce back fast from crushes." The casual dismissal in her voice. Tyler the catering boy, like he was some nameless service worker instead of a person who'd spent 3 months nervously working up the courage to ask me out, made my chest tight with anger. "I'm just so grateful Mom and Dad understood how important this is for us. Your cousin is going to love meeting me at the firm party next weekend. This could literally change our whole future. Our future." Like Kieran had proposed, instead of just dangling the possibility of a job interview in front of her like a carrot, I continued up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. My room felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow, like the walls had moved closer together while I was gone. The prom photos I'd printed and pinned to my bulletin board looked like artifacts from someone else's life. Me and my friends at the dress shop, laughing as we tried on different styles. The Pinterest board I'd created for hair ideas. The carefully researched list of restaurants Tyler and I had planned to try before the dance. All of it meaningless now. I sat on the edge of my bed and carefully unpinned each photo, each note, each reminder of a night that would never happen. The bulletin board looked naked without them, just brown cork and scattered pushpin holes like acne scars. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since I'd turned it back on, but I'd been ignoring it. Now I finally looked at the screen. 14 missed calls from Tyler, 23 text messages, and a voicemail that was 2 minutes and 37 seconds long. I knew I shouldn't listen to it. Knew it would only make everything hurt worse. But sometimes you need to understand exactly how deep the knife went, so you know how long it's going to take to heal. Tyler's voice came through the speaker, shaky and confused. "Valentina, I've been trying to reach you for hours. Your dad, he told my father some things that don't make sense. He said you never wanted to go with me, that you felt pressured and were looking for a way out. But that's not how it felt when we were planning everything. When you were excited about the corsage, about dinner at Romano's, about finally hearing the songs we added to our playlist." His voice cracked, and I had to close my eyes. "I keep thinking about Tuesday morning when you were so happy about finding the perfect shoes. Or last week when you showed me the photo of how you wanted your hair done. You don't fake that kind of excitement, do you? I mean, I'm not great at reading people, but I thought we were friends at least." A long pause. I could hear him breathing, trying to collect himself. "My dad says I need to respect your decision and leave you alone, and I will, if that's what you really want." But Valentina, if something else is going on, if someone's making you do this, you can tell me. My family doesn't have much, but we take care of the people we care about. You don't have to handle everything by yourself. The message ended with the automated timestamp, received today at 8:47 p.m. I stared at my phone screen until it went dark, then stared at my reflection in the black surface. The girl looking back at me had perfect hair, flawless makeup, and a dress that cost more than some people made in a week. She also looked completely empty, like someone had scooped out everything important and left just the shell. A soft knock on my door made me look up. Valentina? Mom's voice, gentle and cautious. Can I come in? I didn't answer, but she opened the door anyway. She'd changed out of her earlier clothes and was wearing her favorite weekend outfit, yoga pants and an oversized sweater that had belonged to my grandmother. The same sweater she wore when she wanted to have serious talks about grades or boyfriends or future plans. How are you feeling, sweetheart? How was I feeling? Like my family had just taught me that my happiness was negotiable. Like the people who were supposed to protect me had thrown me to the wolves for the sake of family peace. Like I'd spent 17 years thinking I mattered to them, only to discover I was just a chess piece they moved around when it was convenient. I'm fine, I said. Mom sat on the edge of my bed, her weight making the mattress dip. I know tonight didn't go the way you planned. But sometimes life asks us to be bigger than our disappointment. Bigger than my disappointment. As if having my entire family conspire against me was just a minor scheduling conflict. Tyler was a nice boy, she continued, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle in my comforter. But honey, you're 17. There will be other boys, other dances. Celeste is older and she's thinking about her future, really thinking about it. This opportunity with Kieran's cousin could open doors for her. What about my doors? Mom looked genuinely confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, what doors are you opening for me? When do I get the family mobilization? When does everyone sacrifice something for my future? Valentina, that's not fair. We've always supported your goals. Name one. She blinked. What? Name one goal of mine that this family has ever actively supported. One thing I wanted where everyone dropped everything to help me get it. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Mom's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. You can't think of anything, can you? I said quietly, because it's never been about what I want. It's about keeping the peace, about making sure Celeste doesn't get upset, about maintaining the family dynamic, where I'm the responsible one, who handles things quietly, while she gets to be dramatic and demanding and catered to. That's not. Mom, you just convinced me to break my prom date so that Celeste's boyfriend could impress his cousin. You did that without even hesitating. And now you're sitting here telling me I should be bigger than my disappointment about it. Mom's face crumpled slightly. We thought you'd understand. You've always been so mature about these things. There it was. The word that had been following me around my entire life. Mature, code for easy to sacrifice. Code for won't make a fuss. Code for we can count on her to swallow her disappointment and smile about it. I'm 17 years old, Mom. I shouldn't have to be mature about my own family sabotaging me. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled it away. Maybe you should get some sleep, she said finally. Things will look different in the morning. After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time. My dress hung on the back of my desk chair like a ghost, beautiful and useless. Through my window, I could see the lights in the Henderson house next door. They were probably having a normal Saturday night, watching a movie, sharing popcorn, existing in the kind of family where people protected each other instead of throwing each other under the bus. I pulled out Mrs. Nakamura's business card and turned it over in my hands. Sacramento was 300 miles away. A different world from Millhaven's small-town politics and family expectations. For the first time since I'd walked out of that living room, I let myself cry. Not the pretty, delicate tears that leave your makeup intact, but the ugly, body-shaking sobs that come from somewhere deeper than disappointment. I cried for Tyler, sitting at home in his rented tuxedo wondering what he'd done wrong. I cried for the girl I'd been this morning, so excited about a night that would never happen. I cried for the family I'd thought I had, the one where people loved each other enough to choose kindness over convenience. Most of all, I cried because for the first time in my life I understood exactly how alone I really was. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow but oddly clear, like a storm had passed through and washed away everything that wasn't essential. What remained was simple. I couldn't count on my family to protect me. I couldn't count on them to consider my happiness when making their choices. I couldn't count on them to see me as anything more than a supporting character in Celeste's story. But I could count on myself. Mrs. Nakamura had been right. I was 17, not 70. I had time to build something different. Something where my choices mattered. I just had to figure out how to start. Sunday morning came too early and too bright. The sun streamed through my curtains like it had every right to be cheerful, illuminating my prom dress still hanging on the chair like evidence of a crime. I could hear the familiar sounds of weekend morning in the Patterson household, Dad's coffee grinder, Mom's news podcast, the distant hum of Celeste's hairdryer running for what would probably be the next 45 minutes. Normal. Everything was aggressively, insultingly normal. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, avoiding my reflection in the mirror. The girl who'd spent 2 hours on her hair yesterday felt like a stranger now. Someone naive enough to believe that wanting something was the same as deserving it. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like Dad's famous Sunday pancakes, a tradition he'd maintained since Celeste and I were little. Usually, the smell made me hungry. Today, it made my stomach clench. "Morning, sunshine," Dad called from the stove, not turning around. "Hope you worked up an appetite. I made extra batter." Celeste sat at the counter, scrolling through her phone with a satisfied smile. She'd done a full face of makeup even though it was barely 9 a.m., probably planning to post photos of their perfect family breakfast. The kind of photos that would get dozens of hearts and comments about how blessed they all were. "Valentina," she chirped without looking up. "You missed such a cute movie last night. Kieran came over and we watched this romantic comedy on Netflix. So much better than some stuffy school dance, don't you think?" The casual cruelty of it, pretending that I'd chosen to stay home, that missing prom had been my preference rather than their manipulation, made my jaw clench. "Actually," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, "I've been thinking about getting a job." Dad glanced over his shoulder. "A job? You already work at Rosetti's." "I mean a real job. Full-time. I'm 18 in 3 months, and I think it's time I started planning my future." The kitchen went quiet except for the sizzle of pancakes on the griddle. Mom looked up from her tablet, eyebrows raised. Celeste finally put down her phone. "Honey, you don't need to work full-time," Mom said carefully. "You've got your senior year to finish, college applications to work on. There's plenty of time for career planning after graduation." "Is there?" I poured myself a cup of coffee, adding sugar with deliberate precision. "Because it seems like other people's career plans are taking priority over my education. I figure if I'm going to be making sacrifices anyway, I might as well make them for my own benefit." Dad set down his spatula. "Valentina, if this is about last night, this is about me realizing that I need to take responsibility for my own future, since I clearly can't count on family support for my goals." "That's not fair," Celeste interjected. "We're a family. Sometimes we have to compromise." "No, Celeste, sometimes I have to compromise. There's a difference." The silence that followed felt dangerous, like the moment before a thunderstorm when all the birds stop singing. "Well," Mom said finally, her voice carefully neutral, "if you're serious about this, maybe we should sit down and make a plan together. Look at some local opportunities that wouldn't interfere with school." I almost laughed. Even now, even after everything, they thought they could manage me, guide me toward choices that would be convenient for them while making me feel like I had agency. Actually, I already have some ideas. I pulled Mrs. Nakamura's business card from my pocket and set it on the counter. I might look into opportunities in Sacramento. Dad's face went pale. Sacramento? Valentina, that's 300 miles away. I know where Sacramento is, Dad. You can't just move to Sacramento, Celeste said, genuine panic creeping into her voice. You're 17, you don't know anyone there, you'd be completely alone. The irony of her concern, now, after orchestrating my humiliation, wasn't lost on me. But something about the way she said completely alone made me realize she was right, just not in the way she thought. I would be alone in Sacramento. But I was already alone here, surrounded by people who claimed to love me but treated my happiness like a bargaining chip. At least in Sacramento, I wouldn't have to pretend otherwise. I'll think about it, I said, pocketing the card. The rest of breakfast passed in tense silence. Dad's pancakes tasted like cardboard, but I forced myself to eat them methodically, fueling up for whatever came next. After everyone scattered to their Sunday routines, I walked to downtown Millhaven. The town looked different in daylight, smaller somehow. Less like the place where I'd grown up, and more like a stage set I'd outgrown. The buildings that had seemed so substantial and permanent when I was younger now felt temporary, like they were just marking time until something more important came along. I found myself standing in front of the public library, a brick building with tall windows and carved stone lions that had probably been impressive when it was built in 1952. Now it just looked tired, like it was trying too hard to maintain dignity on a limited budget. Inside, the Sunday afternoon crowd was sparse. A few college students home for the weekend, some parents with small children in the picture book section, elderly Mr. Patterson, no relation despite the shared name, reading newspapers in his usual spot by the periodicals. The smell of old books and industrial carpet cleaner was oddly comforting, familiar in a way that didn't carry any family baggage. I found an empty table in the back corner and pulled out a notebook I'd grabbed from my room. If I was serious about changing my life, I needed to get serious about planning. The first page I titled Sacramento Research. I started with basics: cost of living, job market, community colleges. Mrs. Nakamura had mentioned her cousin's restaurant, but I needed backup options. Retail positions, administrative work, anything that would let me support myself while figuring out what came next. The second page was labeled Financial Reality Check. I wrote down everything I had, $847 in my savings account from 2 years of weekend shifts at Rosetti's. Another $230 in cash tucked away in my desk drawer. My car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Dad had bought me for my 16th birthday, was reliable but not worth much as collateral. It wasn't much, but it was more than some people started with. The third page was the hardest to write, what I'm leaving behind. Tyler's name went at the top, followed by my AP classes, my spot on the debate team, my acceptance letter to UC Davis that I'd been so proud of 3 months ago. My room, with its familiar walls and the reading nook I'd created by my window. Sunday morning pancakes and Mom's terrible singing in the shower, and Dad's awful jokes that made Celeste groan but always made me laugh despite myself. The good parts of being a Patterson, the parts that made leaving feel like tearing off a limb instead of stepping out of a trap. But then I added a fourth page, what I'm moving toward. That one was harder to fill. Independence, self-respect, a life where my choices mattered. A job where people said thank you, instead of taking my work for granted. Maybe eventually relationships with people who saw me as more than a supporting character in their stories. It was vague, but it was mine. I was so absorbed in my planning that I didn't notice someone approaching until a shadow fell across my notebook. I looked up to find Sarah Beth Collins, still wearing her church dress, looking at me with curious concern. "Valentina, I didn't see you at prom last night. Are you okay?" Sarah Beth and I had known each other since elementary school, but we moved in different social circles. She was student council president, captain of the volleyball team, destined for somewhere like Stanford or Northwestern. The kind of girl who never had to choose between her happiness and her family's approval, because her family actually wanted her to succeed. "I couldn't make it," I said simply. She glanced down at my notebook, and I saw her eyes widen slightly as she caught sight of the Sacramento research heading. Are you planning to move to Sacramento? I closed the notebook. Maybe. I'm exploring options. Sarah Beth sat down across from me without being invited, her expression shifting from casual curiosity to genuine concern. Valentina, is everything okay at home? I know we don't talk much, but if you need someone to listen. There was something in her voice, a warmth I hadn't expected, that made my throat tight. When was the last time someone in my peer group had offered to listen to me without wanting something in return? My family made some decisions about my future without consulting me, I said carefully. I'm realizing I need to start making my own choices. Sarah Beth nodded slowly. That sounds really scary, but also kind of brave. Brave. When was the last time someone had called me brave, instead of mature or responsible or understanding? My older brother went through something similar, she continued. Not exactly the same, but he had to choose between what our parents wanted and what he needed for himself. It was hard for a while, but he's happier now, living in Portland, working for a nonprofit he actually cares about. Do your parents talk to him? Now they do. It took about a year, but they came around. Turns out they loved him more than they loved being right. She paused. Not all parents are like that, though. Some people choose being right over being loving. I thought about last night, Mom telling me to be bigger than my disappointment, Dad threatening Tyler's family livelihood, Celeste celebrating my sacrifice like it was her personal victory. Yeah, I said quietly, some people do. Sarah Beth reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Whatever you decide, you're not as alone as you probably feel right now. There are people who would support you if you let them. After she left, I sat in the library until closing time, refining my plans and researching everything I could about starting over in a new city. By the time I walked home, the notebook in my backpack felt like a roadmap instead of a fantasy. That night at dinner, I made an announcement. I called Mrs. Nakamura's cousin in Sacramento today. She's looking for someone to start as a server but with potential to move into management. The pay is decent, and she can help me find housing. The silence around the dinner table was deafening. Valentina, Dad said finally, you're not thinking clearly. You can't just run away from your problems. I'm not running away from my problems, Dad. I'm walking away from being other people's solution. For the first time in my life, I didn't wait for permission to leave the table. I just stood up, cleared my plate, and walked upstairs to start packing. The girl who had cried herself to sleep in a prom dress was gone. In her place was someone who understood the difference between being alone and being free. 3 days later, I was folding my last load of laundry when Celeste knocked on my bedroom door. Not the confident rap she usually used when she wanted something, but a hesitant tap, tap, tap that made me look up from my suitcase with suspicion. Can I come in? I didn't answer, but she entered anyway, closing the door behind her with unusual care. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her usual armor of perfect makeup and carefully chosen outfits had been replaced with an oversized hoodie and leggings, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that actually looked messy instead of artfully disheveled. I know you're mad at me, she began, perching on the edge of my desk chair like she was ready to bolt at the first sign of hostility. Mad doesn't really cover it, Celeste. She winced. I deserve that. But Valentina, I need to tell you something about prom night, about what really happened. I stopped folding the sweater in my hands. What do you mean? What really happened? You wanted Tyler out of the picture so Kieran could impress his cousin with his problem-solving skills. You got Mom and Dad to threaten his family's business. Mission accomplished. That's not, she stopped, running her hands through her hair. God, this is so much worse than I thought it would be. What's worse? Celeste stood up and started pacing the small space between my bed and the window, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. Kieran never asked me to do anything about Tyler. The whole story about Tyler making him uncomfortable at work, about his cousin expecting him to handle some kind of workplace drama, I made all of that up. The sweater fell from my hands onto the floor. You what? I made it up, Valentina. Tyler barely even talks to Kieran at the marketing firm. They work in completely different departments. Kieran didn't even know Tyler was taking you to prom until I told him. I sat down heavily on my bed, trying to process what she was saying. Then why did you? Because I was jealous. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for days. You were so happy about prom, so excited about Tyler. And it made me realize that Kieran has never looked at me the way Tyler looked at you in the hallway at school. Kieran has never planned anything special for me, never saved up money for weeks just to buy me flowers, never asked his friends for advice about what I might like. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. You know what Kieran did for my birthday last month? He took me to dinner at Applebee's and split the check. Split it, Valentina. After 8 months of dating. And when I mentioned that it hurt my feelings, he said I was being materialistic and that real love wasn't about money. I stared at her. Celeste. But Tyler worked extra shifts at the catering company for 2 weeks to pay for your corsage and dinner reservations. He researched restaurants for hours to find one that had your favorite kind of music. He asked 3 different people about what color flowers would match your dress. Her voice cracked. And I hated you for having that. I hated that someone cared enough about you to put in that kind of effort. The room felt like it was spinning. So you decided to destroy it. I told myself I was helping you avoid getting hurt, that Tyler was too intense, that high school relationships never last anyway. But really, I just couldn't stand watching someone love you better than anyone had ever loved me. She sank back down into the chair, covering her face with her hands. And the worst part is that it didn't even work. Kieran didn't see me as this amazing girlfriend who solved his problems. He barely even noticed what I'd done. When I told him that you'd canceled your date, he just said cool and went back to scrolling through Instagram. He didn't thank me. He didn't see it as some grand gesture. It was nothing to him. I felt like I was going to be sick. Celeste, Tyler's family could have lost their business. I know, and I've been awake every night since then thinking about that. About Mrs. Nakamura working 2 jobs. About Tyler thinking you just used him and threw him away. About you giving up something you'd been looking forward to for months. She looked up at me, mascara streaked down her cheeks. I called Tyler yesterday. My heart stopped. You did what? I called him and told him the truth. About the lies I made up. About how I manipulated Mom and Dad. About how you gave up prom to protect his family, even though you had every right to be furious. What did he say? He said he'd figured out something was wrong when your dad's story didn't match the text messages you'd sent him. He said he knew you weren't the kind of person who would just abandon someone without explanation. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. He asked if you were okay, if there was anything he could do to help. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb the weight of everything she was telling me. There's more, Celeste said quietly. About Mom and Dad. About why they agreed to help me so quickly. What about them? They didn't just go along with my plan because they wanted to avoid drama. They went along with it because they've never seen you as the kind of daughter who deserves protection. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Remember when I got caught cheating on that biology test sophomore year? Mom and Dad hired a tutor, met with my teachers, even talked to the principal about giving me a second chance. They moved mountains to protect my reputation and my future. I nodded. I remembered. They'd treated it like a family crisis, all hands on deck to fix Celeste's mistake. But when you got mono junior year and missed 3 weeks of school right before AP exams, what did they do? I thought back. I'd been hospitalized for 5 days, then spent 2 weeks recovering at home, barely able to stay awake for more than a few hours at a time. I'd missed crucial review sessions for my AP tests, fallen behind in all my classes. They told me I needed to take responsibility for catching up, that being sick wasn't an excuse for falling behind. Exactly. They made you email all your teachers yourself, arrange your own makeup work, study for AP exams while you were still recovering. They treated your illness like an inconvenience instead of a crisis. She was right. While I'd been struggling to keep up with schoolwork from my hospital bed, they'd been focused on making sure Celeste didn't feel neglected by all the attention I was getting from being sick. You know what Mom said to me last week? Celeste continued. She said that you were the easy daughter, that you never needed much help because you always figured things out on your own. She said it like it was a compliment, but I realized yesterday that it's not. It's not a compliment when your parents don't help you because they assume you don't need it. My throat felt tight. She actually said that? She said you were low maintenance compared to me, that you never asked for much, never made demands, never created drama. She said they could focus their energy on my problems because you were, quote, self-sufficient. The word hit me like a slap. Self-sufficient. Code for, we don't have to worry about her because she'll handle everything herself. Code for, we can sacrifice her happiness because she won't complain. Code for, she's the strong one, so she can carry the weight of everyone else's needs. They've been treating you like the family's emotional support system for years, Valentina. And I let them, because it meant I got more attention, more help, more consideration. I looked around my room at the boxes and suitcases, at the evidence of my plan to leave everything behind and start over 300 miles away. Suddenly, it didn't feel like running away anymore. It felt like the sanest response to an insane situation. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I realized something when I saw you packing. You're not leaving because you're mad at us. You're leaving because you finally figured out that staying means accepting that you don't matter as much as everyone else in this family. And that's not anger. That's clarity. She stood up, moving toward the door. I called Kieran's cousin too. Told her that if anyone from our family tries to interfere with your job opportunity, she should hang up on them. I told her you're the most reliable, hardworking person I know and that any employer would be lucky to have you. I stared at her. You did that? It's the least I could do. Though honestly, the least I could do was not destroy your prom night in the first place. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. Tyler asked for your number in Sacramento. He said he wants to apologize properly and maybe stay in touch if you're okay with that. He said he understands if you never want to see him again, but he hopes someday you'll give him a chance to show you how he really feels about you. After she left, I sat in my half-packed room for a long time, processing everything she'd revealed. The prom night sabotage had been even more petty and destructive than I'd realized, but it had also exposed a family dynamic that had been toxic for years. I wasn't the mature daughter who handled disappointment gracefully. I was the daughter who'd been trained to accept less, expect less, and ask for less, because it was easier for everyone else when I didn't take up space. But Sacramento was 300 miles of space, all mine. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number Celeste had written on a sticky note. Tyler Nakamura. I stared at it for several minutes before typing a simple message. Hi Tyler, I'm sorry about everything that happened. I'm moving to Sacramento next week for a job, but I'd like to explain in person before I go if you're willing to listen. His response came back in less than 5 minutes. I'll listen to anything you want to tell me. And Valentina, I never doubted that you're exactly who I thought you were. Your sister's confession just confirmed it. I smiled for the first time in days. Maybe leaving Millhaven wasn't just about escaping a family that had taught me to settle for scraps. Maybe it was about finding people who would see me as worth the whole meal. I met Tyler at the Millhaven Town Park the next afternoon, at the same bench where I'd sat the night of prom trying to process what my family had done. He arrived 10 minutes early, carrying 2 coffee cups from the little cafe downtown and wearing a nervous expression that made my chest ache. I brought you coffee, he said, offering me one of the cups. 2 sugars, no cream. I remember from chemistry class. Of course he remembered. Tyler was the kind of person who paid attention to details that mattered to the people he cared about. The kind of person who would never casually dismiss someone as low maintenance or self-sufficient because it was easier than actually caring about their needs. "Thank you," I said, accepting the warm cup gratefully. The early October air had a bite to it that reminded me summer was really over. We sat in silence for a few moments, both of us struggling with where to start. Finally, Tyler cleared his throat. "Your sister told me what really happened. About how she lied to your parents. How she made up the story about me making things uncomfortable at work." He shook his head. "I keep trying to understand why someone would do that, but I can't wrap my head around it." Neither could I at first. But I'm starting to understand that some people tear others down when they can't figure out how to build themselves up. Tyler nodded slowly. "She said you gave up Prom to protect my family's business, even after everything they'd done to you. Your mom works 2 jobs, Tyler. Your dad is killing himself trying to keep the catering company afloat. I couldn't let my family's drama cost you guys your livelihood." He was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee cup. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what the worst part was? Not thinking that you'd changed your mind about me. I mean, that hurt, but I could have lived with it. The worst part was thinking that I'd completely misread who you were as a person. That all those Tuesday morning conversations, all those study sessions where we talked about everything and nothing, all the times you made me laugh until my sides hurt, I thought maybe I'd imagined the connection." My throat felt tight. "You didn't imagine anything, Tyler. Those conversations were the best part of my week." "Really?" "Really. When you asked me to prom, I was so happy I called my grandmother and told her about it before I even told my parents." I paused, remembering. She was the only person in my family who seemed genuinely excited for me. Tyler smiled softly. "I called my mom immediately after I asked you. She made me practice pinning on corsages for an hour because she was terrified I'd mess it up on the night." We both laughed, and for a moment it felt like we were back in that sweet, nervous space before everything had gone wrong. "I need to show you something," I said, pulling out my phone. "Something I found yesterday that explains a lot about how my family operates." I'd been going through old text messages the night before, looking for Tyler's number, when I'd stumbled across a group chat between my parents and Celeste from 6 months earlier, a conversation I'd never been included in, discussing plans for my 18th birthday. I handed Tyler my phone, watching his expression change as he read. "Jesus, Valentina," he breathed. The conversation was damning in its casualness. "Dad, so what are we thinking for V's 18th? Same restaurant as last year?" "Mom, actually, that weekend is Celeste's art show opening. Maybe we could do something quiet for V the week after?" "Celeste, or we could just combine it with the art show? Like, make it a family celebration?" "Dad, that's smart. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone." "Mom, perfect. V won't mind sharing. She never makes a fuss about these things." "Celeste, should we tell her ahead of time, or just surprise her?" "Mom, let's just see how the timing works out. She's so easygoing about celebrations." My 18th birthday had indeed been combined with Celeste's art show. I had spent what should have been my milestone birthday standing in a gallery, smiling supportively, while strangers complimented my sister's abstract paintings, and my parents beamed with pride. When someone asked if it was anyone's special day, Mom had mentioned, "Oh, it's Valentina's birthday too," as an afterthought, like I was a bonus feature, rather than the guest of honor. "They planned to sideline your 18th birthday and decided not to even tell you about it," Tyler said, his voice tight with anger. "They just assumed you'd go along with it. There's more." I scrolled to another conversation, this one from junior year. This is from when I was applying for that summer internship at the environmental law firm in Sacramento. "Celeste, did V hear back from that internship thing?" "Mom, she got it, but it's unpaid, and she'd have to live there for 8 weeks. "Dad, that's expensive. Doesn't seem practical." "Celeste plus. I was hoping she could help me with my college applications this summer. She's so good at that stuff. Mom, we should probably encourage her to find something local. She can do environmental work anywhere. Dad, agreed. I'll talk to her about being more realistic. Tyler looked up from the phone. Did you want that internship? More than anything. It was with a firm that specialized in water rights law, working on cases that affected agricultural communities like the one my grandmother grew up in. It would have been perfect for my college applications, and more importantly, it would have given me real experience in a field I actually cared about. What did they tell you? That it wasn't practical to spend money on an unpaid position when I could work at Rosetti's all summer and save up for college. That I should focus on being realistic rather than chasing dreams. I took the phone back, scrolling through more messages. They never mentioned that they'd discussed it without me, or that the real reason they didn't want me to go was because Celeste needed a free personal assistant for her college applications. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing the systematic way my family had diminished my opportunities while elevating Celeste's. There's one more thing, I said, hesitating. This one is harder to show you, but I think you should see it. I pulled up a recording on my phone, a voice memo I'd made the morning after prom night, when I'd been too numb to process everything properly but smart enough to document it. I recorded my mom talking to my Aunt Diane the morning after prom. I was in the kitchen getting water, and she was on the phone in the living room. She didn't know I could hear her. I pressed play, and Mom's voice filled the space between us, casual and matter-of-fact. Oh, the prom thing? Yes, that was a bit dramatic. But honestly, Diane, Valentina needed a reality check. She's been living in this fantasy world where she thinks she's as special as Celeste. And it wasn't healthy. Sometimes you have to help your children understand their place in the family dynamic. What do you mean, their place? Well, Celeste is our creative one, our social butterfly. She needs more support, more guidance. Valentina has always been the responsible one who handles things on her own. It's better for everyone when we focus our energy where it's needed most. But didn't Valentina work really hard to afford that dress? I thought she was excited about going with Tyler. She was, but teenage excitement isn't the same as real priorities. Celeste's relationship with Kieran could lead somewhere significant. This job opportunity through his cousin could change her whole trajectory. Sometimes sacrificing a high school dance is worth it for family advancement. Tyler's face had gone pale. She called your happiness a fantasy world. And my place in the family dynamic is apparently to sacrifice so Celeste can advance. They don't see it as unfair because they genuinely believe I matter less. I put my phone away, surprised by how calm I felt sharing evidence of my own diminishment. A week ago, hearing Mom's words had felt like a knife between my ribs. Now it just felt like documentation. Valentina, this isn't normal family dysfunction. This is systematic emotional abuse disguised as family harmony. I know, it took me 17 years to see it, but I know. Tyler reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. I'm so sorry you grew up thinking this was normal. You deserve so much better than this. I'm starting to believe that, which is why I'm leaving for Sacramento tomorrow. His face fell slightly. Tomorrow? Mrs. Nakamura's cousin can start me on Monday if I can get there by Sunday night. It's not much notice, but I can't stay here another week pretending this is a functional family. I understand. I wish we had more time. To talk, to figure out what could happen between us when you're not dealing with all this toxicity. I squeezed his hand. Tyler, what would you say if I told you I'd like you to visit me in Sacramento, maybe in a few weeks, when I've gotten settled? His face lit up like sunrise. I'd say I've been saving up gas money since the day after prom, hoping you'd give me a chance to drive 300 miles and prove that some people actually keep their promises. Even though I'm complicated, even though my family is a disaster, especially because you're strong enough to walk away from people who don't deserve you. That's not complicated, Valentina. That's brave. As we sat there holding hands on a park bench in the town I was leaving behind, I realized something profound. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just proof of how badly my family had treated me. It was proof that I was worth treating better. Tyler saw it, Mrs. Nakamura saw it, even Sarah Beth Collins saw it. The only people who didn't see my worth were the ones who benefited from me believing I had none. And tomorrow I'd be 300 miles away from their voices, finally free to hear my own. Sacramento welcomed me with October sunshine and the kind of dry heat that felt like a fresh start. Mrs. Nakamura's cousin, Elena Varga, owned a small bistro called Sage and Time in the downtown arts district, the kind of place where local artists displayed their work on brick walls, and the menu changed seasonally based on what looked good at the farmer's market. Elena was nothing like I'd expected. I'd pictured someone middle-aged and maternal, but she was probably only 30, with short dark hair, paint-stained fingernails, and the kind of direct gaze that made you feel like she was seeing straight through to your potential rather than just your current circumstances. "Keiko told me you're running from family drama," she said within 5 minutes of meeting me, as she showed me around the tiny apartment above the restaurant that I'd be renting month to month. Good. People who've never had to fight for their space don't appreciate it when they find it. The apartment was small but perfect. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a window that looked out over the street, and a living room just big enough for a couch and a desk. After 17 years of living in a house where every space was shared and every decision was negotiated, the idea of closing a door that was completely mine felt like luxury. "You start tomorrow," Elena continued, handing me a set of keys. "Lunch shift to begin with, but I'm looking for someone who wants to learn the business side eventually. Keiko says you're sharp with numbers and good with people. We'll see." That first week passed in a blur of learning the menu, memorizing table numbers, and figuring out how to balance 4 plates on my arms without dropping anything. The work was harder than serving at Rosetti's Deli, but it was also more rewarding. The customers weren't just grabbing sandwiches on their lunch breaks. They were writers meeting for coffee dates, couples celebrating anniversaries, business people closing deals over Elena's famous butternut squash ravioli. More importantly, Elena treated me like an adult. When I suggested a more efficient way to organize the takeout order, she implemented it immediately. When I noticed that we were throwing away a lot of day-old bread, she let me research local food banks and set up a donation program. When I mentioned that I'd taken bookkeeping classes in high school, she handed me the restaurant's expense reports and asked for my thoughts on cost reduction. "You've got good instincts," she told me at the end of my second week, as we were closing up for the night. "Most people see problems and complain. You see problems and solve them." It was such a simple observation, but it hit me like a revelation. In Millhaven, my problem-solving skills had been treated as a given. Of course Valentina would figure it out. Of course she'd handle it quietly. Of course she wouldn't need help or recognition. Here, Elena noticed when I made things better and said so. 3 weeks into my Sacramento life, I was working the dinner shift when a familiar face walked through the door. Not familiar in a good way, familiar in a way that made my stomach clench with old anxiety. Kieran Whitmore sat down at table 7 with a blonde woman I didn't recognize, both of them dressed like they were trying too hard to look successful. He was wearing a suit that was probably meant to look expensive but just looked uncomfortable, and she was carrying one of those oversized designer bags that screamed, "Look how much money I spent on this." I ducked behind the service station, my heart pounding. What were the chances that Kieran would walk into my restaurant in Sacramento, 300 miles from Millhaven? But then I remembered. He'd always talked about having connections in the city, about his big plans to move somewhere more sophisticated than small-town California. Elena appeared beside me, noticing my sudden disappearance act. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse. I've seen my sister's boyfriend." She raised an eyebrow. "The sister who caused all the drama?" "That's the one. And if he's here, it means he's probably moved to Sacramento for that job his cousin supposedly offered Celeste. Which means—" I stopped, a horrible realization dawning on me. "Oh my God, Elena, what if he's here to cause problems for me? What if he tries to get me fired?" "Honey, take a breath. First of all, he can't get you fired from a job he has no connection to. Second of all, you're not the same girl who ran away from Millhaven a month ago. You want to know what's changed? Let me show you. She led me to her small office behind the kitchen and pulled out a folder labeled Staff Evaluations. My name was on a tab at the front. Read this, she said, opening to a page covered in her handwriting. Valentina Patterson, Month 1 Review. Customer feedback. Consistently rated excellent for attentiveness and professionalism. Multiple written compliments about her ability to make recommendations and remember regular customers' preferences. Staff feedback. Other servers appreciate her willingness to help during busy periods and her creative solutions to workflow problems. Kitchen staff specifically requested that she continue working dinner shifts because communication with her is so clear. Management observations. Natural leadership qualities. Takes initiative without overstepping. Shows genuine interest in learning all aspects of restaurant operations. Would be excellent candidate for assistant manager role when position becomes available. Recommendation. Promote to senior server with shift supervisor responsibilities. Increase hourly wage to $18 per hour plus tips. Begin training on inventory management and scheduling. I stared at the page, reading it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining the words. Elena, this says you want to promote me. I don't want to promote you, Valentina. I am promoting you. Effective Monday, you're senior server on evening shift, which means you'll be training new hires and helping me manage the floor during busy periods. The assistant manager position will probably open up in the spring when Marcus moves to Portland, and if you keep developing the way you have been, it's yours. But I've only been here a month. So, I've been watching you work for a month. I've seen how you handle difficult customers, how you support other staff members, how you notice things that need fixing and actually fix them instead of just complaining. More importantly, I've seen how you treat this job like it matters to you, not just like a way to pay bills. She closed the folder and looked at me seriously. You know what your problem was in Millhaven? You were surrounded by people who had trained you to believe that competence was expected rather than exceptional. Your family treated your abilities like they were standard equipment instead of valuable skills. Out here, in the real world, people who can think on their feet and make things run smoother are worth their weight in gold. I felt something shift inside my chest, not the crack of breaking, but the warm expansion of something growing. Now, Elena continued, about table 7. You can either hide in here and let some mediocre boy from your hometown make you feel small, or you can walk out there as the senior server of this restaurant and show him exactly who you've become. What if he says something? What if he tries to embarrass me? Then he'll be dealing with me. And honey, I didn't build this business by letting random customers disrespect my staff. She smiled, and there was something a little fierce in it. Besides, something tells me you're stronger than you think you are. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked back out to the dining room. Kieran was studying the menu with the kind of exaggerated concentration people use when they want to look important. The blonde woman was scrolling through her phone, looking bored. I approached their table with my notepad ready, professional smile in place. Good evening, welcome to Sage and Time. Can I start you with something to drink? Kieran looked up, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been embarrassment. Valentina? What are you doing here? I work here. What would you like to drink? But I thought you were still in high school in Millhaven. I graduated early and moved here for work. The drinks menu is on the back page if you need more time to decide. The blonde woman looked between us with mild interest. Do you two know each other? We're from the same hometown, I said before Kieran could answer. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes? Kieran seemed to be struggling with how to respond to this version of me. Calm, professional, completely unimpressed by his presence. I'll have a craft beer, he said finally. Whatever you recommend. Excellent choice. We have a local IPA that pairs really well with our signature pasta dishes. And for you, miss? I took their order efficiently, brought their drinks promptly, and checked on their table with the same level of service I gave all my customers. Attentive, but not lingering. Kieran kept trying to catch my eye, like he wanted to have some kind of personal conversation, but I kept things strictly professional. When they were ready to leave, Kieran lingered by the hostess station while the blonde woman went to the restroom. Valentina, can we talk for a minute? I'm working, Kieran. Was there something wrong with your service tonight? No, the service was great. I wanted to ask about Celeste. She's been really upset since you left. She said she told you some things about prom night, and now she feels terrible. I looked at him calmly. Celeste made her choices. I made mine. But she's family. Don't you think you could forgive her? She was just trying to help our relationship by sabotaging mine. And frankly, Kieran, if your relationship needed her to destroy other people's happiness to succeed, then it wasn't much of a relationship to begin with. He flinched. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? A 17-year-old girl giving up her prom to protect a family's livelihood from threats that were based on lies. But I'm not 17 anymore, and I'm not interested in managing other people's guilt. The blonde woman returned, and Kieran had no choice but to leave with her. But as they walked toward the door, I heard him mutter something to her about family drama and people who can't let things go. Elena appeared at my elbow as the door closed behind them. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. A month ago, seeing Kieran would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety about what he might tell my family, what trouble he might cause, what ways he might find to make my life difficult. Now, he was just another customer who'd left a decent tip and probably wouldn't be back. I feel like I just served dinner to a stranger, I said. Elena grinned. That, my dear, is what power looks like. 4 months into my Sacramento life, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 unread text messages, all from my family, all marked as, quote, urgent. I'd been expecting this moment, the inevitable family crisis that would bring them knocking on my door with their hands out and their excuses ready. What I hadn't expected was for it to involve Kieran directly. The first text from Mom was time-stamped at 2:17 a.m. Valentina, we need to talk. It's about Celeste and some serious legal trouble. Please call as soon as you get this. Dad's voicemail, left at 3:45 a.m., was more specific. Valentina, I know we haven't spoken since you left, but this is an emergency. Celeste is being sued by her former employer for theft. The lawyer says we need character witnesses who can speak to her reliability and work ethic. We need you to come home and help us figure this out. But it was Celeste's text, sent at 4:23 a.m., that told the real story. Val, I'm in so much trouble. I did something really stupid at the boutique, and now they're saying I stole money from the register. Kieran said he could help, but now he's making everything worse. Mom and Dad hired a lawyer, but he's expensive and wants references from people who know my character. Please come home. I know I don't deserve it, but you're the only person I know who everyone respects. I sat in my small kitchen with my morning coffee, reading through the desperate messages while Sacramento morning light streamed through my windows. 6 months ago, these messages would have sent me into a panic. I would have been on the road to Millhaven within the hour, ready to sacrifice whatever necessary to help solve the family crisis. Now they just felt predictable. I called Elena to let her know I might need to leave work early for a family emergency, then drove to the address Celeste had texted me. Not home, but some lawyer's office in downtown Millhaven. The 4-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think about what I was walking into and what I was willing to offer. The law offices of Mitchell & Associates looked expensive in that conservative mahogany and leather way that was supposed to inspire confidence in people with money to spend. I found my family clustered in the waiting room like refugees, Dad in his weekend clothes looking older than I remembered, Mom with her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that suggested she'd been up all night, and Celeste with red-rimmed eyes and the kind of pale, hollow look that comes from sustained panic. "Valentina!" Mom jumped up like I was the cavalry arriving. "Thank God you came. We weren't sure you'd get our messages." "I got them. What's going on?" "It's complicated," Dad began, but Celeste cut him off. "I took money from the boutique register. Not a lot, and I was going to pay it back, but they found out and now they're pressing charges." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The lawyer says if I have character witnesses and can show that I'm getting family support for my problems, they might agree to a plea deal instead of pursuing felony charges." "What problems are you getting support for?" Celeste glanced at our parents, who suddenly found the carpet very interesting. "The gambling," she said quietly. I blinked. "What gambling?" "Kieran got me into online poker about 6 months ago. He said he had a system that we could make enough money to move to Sacramento together and start our own business. But I kept losing, and I started using credit cards to cover the losses, and when those got maxed out, you started stealing from your employer." She nodded miserably. "Just small amounts at first, 20 here, 50 there. I told myself I'd pay it back as soon as Kieran's system started working. But it never did, and the debt kept growing, and now I owe almost $4,000 to various credit cards, plus the $1,500 they say I took from the store." I looked at my parents. "How long have you known about this?" "We suspected something was wrong when she started asking for money more frequently," Mom said. "But we didn't know about the gambling or the theft until yesterday when the police called. And where's Kieran in all this?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "He left," Celeste said finally. "As soon as he heard about the legal trouble, he said he couldn't be associated with someone facing criminal charges. He said it would hurt his reputation in the marketing industry." She laughed bitterly. "His reputation. Like he was some kind of executive instead of an entry-level data processor who got fired for coming to work hungover too many times." "Wait, he got fired?" 3 months ago. That's when he really started pushing the gambling thing, said we needed alternative income streams." She wiped her nose with a tissue. "Turns out the cousin who was supposed to give me a job doesn't even exist. Kieran made that up, too." I absorbed this information slowly. The job opportunity that had been worth destroying my prom for had been complete fiction. Celeste had sacrificed my happiness for a fantasy relationship with a compulsive liar who'd convinced her to gamble away her future. "So what exactly do you want from me?" I asked. "The lawyer says character witnesses can make a big difference in plea negotiations," Dad said. "People who can speak to Celeste's integrity, her family values, her potential for rehabilitation." "Her integrity?" Mom flinched at my tone. "Valentina, I know you're still angry about what happened before you left." "I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just confused about why you think I'd be willing to lie under oath about Celeste's integrity." "It wouldn't be lying," Dad said quickly. "You've known Celeste her whole life. You know she's not a bad person, just someone who made some poor choices." "Dad, Celeste sabotaged my prom night based on lies, convinced you to threaten an innocent family's livelihood, and spent months treating me like I was disposable. Then she developed a gambling addiction and started stealing from her employer. What exactly about that suggests good character?" Celeste looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "I know I've been terrible to you. I know I don't deserve your help. But Val, I'm looking at possible jail time. The lawyer says first-time offenders with family support and good character references usually get probation and community service. But without that support..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "What kind of family support?" "Someone to guarantee that I'll get counseling for the gambling problem. Someone to help me stay accountable while I'm paying back what I owe. Someone who can speak to my ability to change and grow." She took a shaky breath. "Someone everyone knows is honest and responsible." There it was, the same dynamic that had ruled my entire childhood, dressed up in legal language. They needed the responsible daughter to clean up the mess made by the creative one. They needed my reputation to rehabilitate hers, my stability to guarantee her recovery, my credibility to convince a judge that she deserved a second chance. And if I say no, then she probably goes to prison, Mom said bluntly. Is that what you want? Your sister in jail because you couldn't forgive her mistakes? The emotional manipulation was so familiar it was almost comforting in its predictability. Make it my fault if Celeste faced consequences for her own actions. Make my refusal to help equivalent to actively hurting her. When is the plea hearing? I asked. Next Friday, the lawyer said, speaking for the first time since I had arrived. We need character references and a family support plan submitted by Wednesday. I need to think about this. Valentina, Dad's voice took on that sharp edge I remembered from childhood. This is your sister we're talking about. Family means showing up when it matters, I interrupted, using the same phrase from Celeste's social media posts all those months ago. But it also means taking responsibility for your actions, something this family has never been good at teaching. I stood up to leave, and Mom grabbed my arm. Where are you going? We need to discuss this. No, Mom, you need to discuss this among yourselves. I need to decide whether I'm willing to tie my reputation to someone who's proven she'll throw me under the bus the moment it's convenient. She was 17 when that happened, Dad protested. People change, Valentina. People grow up. Some people do, I agreed. But growth requires acknowledging the damage you've caused and making amends for it. Not just needing help when you're in trouble. I walked toward the door, then turned back. If you want my help, Celeste needs to do 3 things. First, she needs to write letters of apology to Tyler and his family for the lies she told and the harm she caused. Second, she needs to publicly acknowledge what she did to me on prom night and take full responsibility for it. And third, she needs to explain to me how she's going to prevent this pattern from repeating in the future. Celeste's face went white. Valentina, I can't make this public. If people in Millhaven find out what really happened, then you'll face the social consequences of your actions, just like Tyler and I faced them when you lied about us. But that's different. I'm already dealing with legal problems. This would ruin my reputation in town. I smiled sadly. Celeste, you just asked me to put my reputation on the line to save you from prison, but you won't put yours on the line to acknowledge the harm you caused other people. That tells me everything I need to know about whether you've actually changed. I left them sitting in that expensive law office, probably planning their next strategy for convincing me to save them from the consequences of their choices. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning to make their problem my responsibility. The drive back to Sacramento felt like breathing again. I made it exactly 2 days before the attacks began. The first sign of trouble came Tuesday morning, when Elena pulled me aside before the lunch shift, her usual calm demeanor replaced with barely contained anger. Did you know someone's been calling the restaurant asking questions about you? My blood went cold. What kind of questions? Questions about your work performance, your reliability, whether you've had any issues with money handling or customer complaints. The caller claimed to be conducting a background check for a potential employer, but something felt off about it. What did you tell them? I told them to submit their request in writing through proper channels, and then I hung up. Elena crossed her arms. Valentina, is there something I should know about? Because if you're in some kind of legal trouble, I'm not, but my family is, and they're not happy that I refused to help them the way they expected. Elena's expression darkened. They're trying to sabotage your job. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We tried to do this the easy way. Last chance to reconsider before things get complicated for you in Sacramento. I showed Elena the message, and her jaw tightened. That sounds like a threat. It is a threat. My family doesn't handle being told no very well. The harassment escalated throughout the week. Wednesday brought anonymous Yelp reviews claiming I'd been rude to customers and had given them food poisoning. Thursday, someone called the restaurant claiming to be from the health department and demanding to know if we'd had any issues with staff hygiene. Friday morning, I arrived at work to find a formal complaint had been filed with the Better Business Bureau alleging that Sage and Time employed someone with a criminal background. Elena was livid. "This is beyond family drama, Valentina. This is systematic harassment designed to destroy your livelihood. We need to document everything and consider filing a police report." But the worst was yet to come. Friday afternoon, just as the lunch rush was winding down, 3 familiar figures walked through the restaurant door. Mom, Dad, and Kieran. Not Celeste. Apparently she was too ashamed to face me directly, but not too ashamed to send others to do her dirty work. They took a table in my section, of course. Because nothing said family reconciliation, like ambushing someone at their workplace. I approached their table with my notepad, keeping my voice professionally neutral despite the way my hands were shaking. "Good afternoon. What can I get you to drink?" Mom looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Valentina, sweetheart, we need to talk. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand." "I'm at work, Mom. What would you like to drink?" "Just water for all of us," Dad said impatiently. "Valentina, we've driven 4 hours to see you. The least you can do is give us 5 minutes." I glanced toward the kitchen, where Elena was watching our interaction with obvious concern. "I'll bring your water and be right back to take your order." When I returned with their drinks, they were whispering urgently among themselves. Kieran looked distinctly uncomfortable, like he'd been dragged along against his better judgment. "We're not here to eat," Mom said as I set down the glasses. "We're here because Celeste's court date is Monday, and she's having a complete breakdown. The lawyer says without character witnesses, she's looking at 6 months minimum." "That's unfortunate. Are you ready to order, or do you need more time with the menu?" Dad's face flushed with anger. "Stop playing games, Valentina. Your sister could go to prison. And that would be a consequence of her choices, not my responsibility." "It is your responsibility," Mom hissed, leaning forward. "She's your sister. She made mistakes, but she's trying to make amends." "Really? Because trying to get me fired from my job doesn't seem like making amends." Kieran shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed them the threatening text. "This came from a number registered to you, Kieran. Did you think I wouldn't figure that out?" He had the grace to look ashamed, but Dad just doubled down. "If you just agreed to help your sister like any decent person would, none of this would have been necessary." "Any decent person?" "Dad, let me tell you what a decent person does. A decent person doesn't threaten innocent families when their daughter wants to go to prom. A decent person doesn't sabotage their child's job opportunities for their siblings' benefit. A decent person doesn't show up at their child's workplace to harass them into submission." Other customers were starting to stare, and I could see Elena approaching our table with the kind of expression that suggested she was about to throw someone out. "Is everything all right here?" Elena asked, positioning herself slightly between me and my family. "These people were just leaving," I said. "No, we weren't," Mom said, standing up. "Elena, isn't it? We're Valentina's family, and we need to speak with her privately about a family emergency." "Any family emergency can be discussed after her shift ends and off restaurant property," Elena replied firmly. "Right now she's working, and you're disrupting our other customers." Dad stood up too, his voice rising. "This is more important than serving lunch. Valentina's sister is facing prison time, and she's the only one who can prevent it." "That's not my problem," Elena said calmly. "What is my problem is customers harassing my staff. I'm going to need you to leave." "We're not leaving without our daughter," Mom declared. The entire restaurant had gone quiet now, everyone watching our family drama play out in real time. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but also with something else. A clean, bright anger that I'd never allowed myself to feel before. "I'm not your daughter when you need me to be," I said loudly enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "I'm not your daughter when it's time for birthday celebrations or family photos or prom nights. I'm only your daughter when you need someone to clean up messes you can't handle yourselves." Mom's face went white. "Valentina, lower your voice." "Why? So you can continue pretending we're a loving family to these strangers? So you can maintain the fiction that this is just a misunderstanding instead of a lifetime pattern of emotional manipulation?" I turned to address the restaurant at large, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent dining room. 6 months ago, my family convinced me to cancel my prom date to protect their business interests. They told lies, made threats, and destroyed what should have been one of the happiest nights of my teenage life. When I moved here to get away from that toxicity, they left me alone, until they needed something from me. Now they want me to perjure myself to keep my sister out of prison for theft and gambling addiction. And when I said no, they tried to destroy my job with anonymous complaints and false accusations. The silence was deafening. Dad's face had gone from red to purple. "Valentina Marie Patterson, you stop this right now. You're embarrassing your family." "No, Dad. You embarrassed our family when you chose Celeste's convenience over Tyler's well-being. You embarrassed our family when you taught me that my happiness was negotiable, but hers was sacred. You embarrassed our family when you showed up at my workplace to coerce me into lying for someone who's never shown me the same loyalty." Elena stepped forward. "I think it's time for you folks to leave. Now." "We're not done here," Dad said, but his bluster was fading in the face of Elena's unwavering stare and the obvious disapproval of the other customers. "Yes, you are," I said quietly. "You're done using me as your solution to problems you created. You're done expecting me to sacrifice my integrity for family members who've never sacrificed anything for me. You're done treating my love like it's unlimited and unconditional, no matter how badly you behave." Mom reached for me one last time. "Valentina, please. She's your sister." "She was my sister when she destroyed my prom night, too. That didn't seem to matter then." They left, finally, Kieran practically dragging my parents toward the door while other customers watched with a mixture of sympathy and fascination. After they were gone, Elena put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I looked around the restaurant, at the faces of strangers who had just witnessed my family's dysfunction in all its toxic glory. 6 months ago, I would have been mortified. Now I just felt relieved. "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. "Good. Because I think you just handled that like a boss." "Literally." She smiled. "That assistant manager position I mentioned? It's yours if you want it. Someone who can stand up to family pressure like that can definitely handle difficult customers and staff conflicts." That evening, I got a call from Tyler. "I heard what happened at the restaurant today," he said without preamble. "How did you—" "Elena called my mom, who called me. Are you okay?" I thought about his question seriously. Was I okay? My family was probably never going to speak to me again. Celeste was facing prison time. I'd aired our dirty laundry in front of strangers and burned bridges I could never rebuild. "Tyler, I've never been better in my life." "Good," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Because I've been saving up vacation days, and I think it's time I came to visit my favorite assistant manager." As I hung up the phone and looked around my small apartment, my space, my rules, my life, I realized something profound had shifted. The people who loved me celebrated my boundaries. The people who attacked my boundaries had never really loved me at all. It had taken me 18 years to learn the difference, but now that I knew, I was never going back. Monday morning arrived with the kind of California sunshine that makes everything feel possible. I was reviewing weekend sales reports in my new office, a small room behind the kitchen that Elena had cleared out for me to use as assistant manager, when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my heart skip. Tyler had tagged me in a post on Instagram. The photo showed the two of us from the weekend before, when he'd finally made good on his promise to visit Sacramento. We were sitting at one of Sage and Time's outdoor tables, laughing at something he'd just said, looking completely comfortable together, in a way that had nothing to do with prom dresses or fancy restaurants and everything to do with genuine connection. His caption was simple but perfect. Finally got to take this amazing woman on a proper date. 6 months late, but worth the wait. Proud of you for building something beautiful. At Valentina_. The comments were already rolling in from his friends and coworkers back in Millhaven. Supportive, happy comments that made it clear people had been rooting for us even when we couldn't root for ourselves. But one comment stopped me cold. At Celeste Patterson 91. Val, I saw this and I needed you to know I'm proud of you too. I know I have no right to comment on your life after what I did, but seeing you happy makes me realize how much I stole from you. I owe you more than an apology. Before I could process that fully, Elena appeared in my office doorway with an expression I couldn't read. You need to see something, she said, holding up her phone. Someone posted a video that's going viral on TikTok. It's about you. My stomach dropped. What kind of video? She turned her phone toward me and I saw a familiar face on the screen. Sarah Beth Collins, the girl from the library who'd offered to listen when I was planning my escape to Sacramento. She was sitting in what looked like her college dorm room, speaking directly to the camera with the kind of earnest intensity that made people stop scrolling. I've been debating whether to make this video for weeks, she began, but after seeing some posts about family loyalty and forgiveness, I decided I needed to share a story about what real loyalty looks like. Elena pressed play, and Sarah Beth's voice filled my small office. Last spring, I knew a girl. I'm not going to name names, but she was in my graduating class, who got completely screwed over by her own family, like, spectacularly betrayed. Her sister destroyed her prom night based on lies. Her parents threatened an innocent family's livelihood to make it happen, and when she tried to stand up for herself, they gaslit her into thinking she was being selfish and dramatic. My hands started shaking. This girl had worked for months to pay for her prom dress. She was so excited about going with this really sweet guy who'd been planning the perfect night for her. And her family made her give it all up to solve a problem that didn't even exist, for the benefit of a sister who'd fabricated the whole crisis out of jealousy. Sarah Beth leaned closer to the camera, her voice getting more passionate. But here's what made me need to tell this story. When this girl realized her family would always sacrifice her happiness for her sister's convenience, she didn't throw a fit. She didn't try to get revenge. She quietly packed her bags and moved 300 miles away to build a life where her choices actually mattered. The view count in the corner showed over 50,000 views and climbing. And now, months later, when her sister got arrested for theft and gambling addiction, guess what happened? The family that had cut her out of photos and ignored her accomplishments suddenly needed her reputation to save them from consequences. When she said no, they tried to destroy her job and harassed her at work. Sarah Beth's voice broke slightly. I saw this girl handle that confrontation with more grace and strength than most adults I know. She didn't let them manipulate her into sacrificing her integrity to clean up messes she didn't make. She set boundaries and stuck to them, even when it meant being completely cut off from her family. The camera zoomed in on Sarah Beth's face. So if you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, if you're the responsible one who's expected to fix everyone else's problems, if you're the one who gets told you're mature and understanding, when really you're just being used, I want you to know that walking away is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. For yourself and for the people who think they can treat you like their personal cleanup crew. She paused, looking directly into the camera. And if you're the family member who's watching someone you love set boundaries, maybe ask yourself why those boundaries threaten you so much. Because people who really love you celebrate your growth. They don't punish you for refusing to be their solution anymore. The video ended with a black screen showing resources for people dealing with family manipulation and emotional abuse. Elena was watching my face carefully. That's about you, isn't it? I nodded, unable to speak. How do you feel about her sharing your story? I thought about it. A part of me felt exposed, like Sarah Beth had aired my private business for the world to see. But a bigger part of me felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of my family's narrative that I was ungrateful, selfish, disloyal. Now someone else was telling a different story, one where my choices made sense, and my boundaries were reasonable. I feel like someone finally sees what actually happened, I said. My phone buzzed with another notification, then another, and another. The video had been shared to Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. Comments were pouring in from people who recognized their own families in Sarah Beth's description. Stories of other responsible children who'd been expected to sacrifice endlessly for siblings who never reciprocated. Stories of people who'd been called ungrateful for refusing to enable their family's dysfunction. One comment particularly stood out. "This is exactly what happened to my brother. My parents always expected him to fix my problems and clean up my messes, and when he finally moved across the country, they acted like he was the one breaking up the family. It took me years to realize they'd trained us both, me to be helpless and him to be my caretaker. I had to learn how to be a functional adult, and he had to learn that he wasn't responsible for my failures. We're closer now than we ever were when he was enabling me." Another notification made me look up. This one was from a local Sacramento news station. "Hi, Valentina. We'd like to interview you about the viral video regarding family dynamics and boundary setting. Your story is resonating with thousands of people who've experienced similar situations. Would you be interested in sharing your perspective?" Elena raised her eyebrows. "They want to interview you for the news?" "Apparently. Are you going to do it?" I thought about it. 6 months ago, the idea of talking publicly about my family's dysfunction would have horrified me. The girl who'd walked out of prom night in silence would never have considered making her private pain into a public statement. But that girl had been afraid of making waves, afraid of being seen as difficult, afraid of burning bridges she might need someday. This girl, the woman I'd become, wasn't afraid of being seen, wasn't afraid of taking up space, wasn't afraid of telling the truth, even when the truth made other people uncomfortable. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." The interview aired that Thursday. I'd worn my best professional outfit. A navy blazer Elena had helped me pick out for the assistant manager position, and spoke calmly about the pattern of family dynamics that had led me to leave Millhaven. I didn't name names or share details that would humiliate anyone unnecessarily. I focused on the broader issue, how families sometimes designate one child as the helper and another as the helped, creating unhealthy dynamics that persist into adulthood. The hardest part, I told the interviewer, wasn't realizing that my family had treated me unfairly. It was realizing that they genuinely believed their treatment of me was normal and loving. They thought asking me to sacrifice my happiness for my sister's convenience was what family members do for each other. They couldn't understand why setting boundaries felt necessary to me because they'd never had to set any themselves. What would you say to other young people in similar situations? I'd say that loyalty isn't supposed to be one-sided. Love isn't supposed to require you to make yourself smaller so other people can take up more space. And if the people in your life only value you for what you can do for them, they don't actually love you. They love your usefulness. The interviewer leaned forward. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with your family?" I considered the question carefully. I think reconciliation requires accountability from both sides. If my family ever gets to a place where they can acknowledge the harm they caused and take responsibility for changing the patterns that led to it, I'd be open to rebuilding our relationship. But I won't sacrifice my well-being to maintain relationships with people who see my boundaries as betrayal. After the interview aired, my phone exploded with messages. Some from strangers thanking me for speaking up, some from old classmates who said they'd never understood what had really happened but were proud of me for building a new life, and some from extended family members who'd apparently been watching the situation from the sidelines with concern. But the message that mattered most came from Tyler. "Watched your interview. You were incredible. Clear, honest, strong without being cruel. I'm so proud of how you're handling all of this. Can't wait to see you this weekend. That evening, as I was closing the restaurant, Elena pulled me aside one more time. I've been thinking about everything that's happened this week, she said. The video, the interview, the way you've handled having your story go public. I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? I've been talking to some other restaurant owners about opening a second location. Somewhere bigger, maybe with a small event space for community gatherings. The kind of place that could host support groups, networking events, maybe even workshops for young people learning to set boundaries with difficult families. She smiled at my surprised expression. I want you to manage it. Full management, not assistant. Your own staff, your own vision, your own space to build something meaningful. What do you think? I thought about the girl who'd walked out of a prom night with nothing but her dignity and a determination to build something better. I think, I said, that sounds like exactly the kind of project someone builds when they finally understand their own worth. Elena laughed. Good answer. Let's start planning. As I drove home that night, I realized something profound had shifted in the past week. I wasn't just surviving my family's rejection anymore. I was thriving because of the strength I'd found in walking away from people who didn't value me. The truth had set me free in ways I'd never imagined possible. 2 years later, I was reviewing quarterly reports for Sage and Time East, the second location Elena and I had opened in Sacramento's growing downtown district, when my assistant knocked on my office door. Miss Patterson, there's someone here to see you. He says it's about a job interview, but he doesn't have an appointment. I looked up from my laptop, curious. We weren't actively hiring management positions, and most server interviews were handled by my floor supervisors. Did he give you his name? Kieran Whitmore. He seemed pretty insistent that you'd want to see him. My pen froze halfway through signing a vendor invoice. Kieran? Here, looking for a job. Send him in. I had about 30 seconds to process what this meant before Kieran appeared in my doorway. He looked different. Older, definitely. Thinner. The cocky swagger I remembered from high school had been replaced by something that looked an awful lot like desperation barely held in check. His clothes were wrinkled, like he'd been wearing the same shirt for days. His hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp and unwashed. The designer knockoffs had been replaced with discount store basics that didn't quite fit right. Valentina. He stood awkwardly in front of my desk, clearly unsure of the protocol. Thank you for seeing me. Kieran, it's been a while. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please sit down. He perched on the edge of the chair like he was ready to bolt at any moment. I know this is weird, he began, and I know I probably don't deserve to be here after everything that happened. But I heard you were hiring, and I really need this job. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. We're not hiring management positions right now. What exactly are you looking for? Anything. Server, busser, dishwasher. I don't care. I just need something steady. The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the entitled 24-year-old who'd convinced my sister to sabotage my prom night. This was someone who'd hit rock bottom hard enough to leave marks. What happened to your marketing career? He laughed bitterly. What marketing career? I got fired from the data entry job 3 months after you left Millhaven. Turns out lying about your connections and coming to work hungover aren't great career strategies. Who knew? And since then, I've been bouncing between temp jobs mostly. But the gambling thing got out of control after Celeste and I broke up, and I burned through what little savings I had. Lost my apartment in Millhaven 6 months ago. I've been staying in my car mostly, picking up whatever work I can find. I processed this information slowly. Kieran, who'd once acted like he was destined for greatness, who'd manipulated my sister into destructive behavior, who'd abandoned her the moment his actions had consequences, was now homeless and begging me for a job. Why Sacramento? Why here specifically? Because I heard you were successful, that you'd built something real. He met my eyes for the first time since sitting down, and because I owe you an apology that's about 2 years overdue. Go ahead. He took a shaky breath. I convinced Celeste to sabotage your prom night because I was jealous. Not of Tyler, of you. I raised my eyebrows. Of me? You had this certainty about yourself. Like you knew who you were and what you wanted. Tyler looked at you like you were the most interesting person in the room, and I realized that nobody had ever looked at me that way. Celeste didn't look at me that way. She looked at me like I was her ticket to something better, and I looked at her the same way. He ran his hands through his unwashed hair. So when she mentioned how happy you were about prom, how excited you were about Tyler, I thought if I could make that go away, maybe I'd feel better about my own situation. If I could prove that your happiness was just as fragile as mine, maybe I wouldn't feel so pathetic. And the lies about Tyler making you uncomfortable at work? Complete fiction. Tyler barely knew I existed. I was nobody at that marketing firm, just another data entry clerk who showed up late and left early. But Celeste wanted to believe I was important, so I let her. I nodded slowly. What happened after I left? Everything fell apart. Without you there to blame for our problems, Celeste and I had to face the fact that our relationship was built on absolutely nothing. We started fighting constantly. She got deeper into the gambling, I started drinking more to avoid dealing with her spiral, and eventually we were just two people destroying each other in real time. He paused, staring at his hands. When she got arrested, I panicked. I couldn't be associated with someone facing criminal charges, not because of my reputation, but because I was terrified they'd look too closely at my own finances and figure out I'd been skimming from petty cash at whatever jobs I could get. You were stealing too? Small amounts, 20 here, 50 there, just enough to cover my gambling losses and keep up appearances. But after Celeste's arrest, I got paranoid and quit every job I had. Couldn't handle the pressure of wondering if they were watching me. The irony was staggering. The person who destroyed my prom night to protect his fake reputation had been engaging in the same behavior he'd eventually abandoned Celeste for. So what do you want from me, Kieran? A chance. I know I don't deserve it. I know you have every reason to tell me to get out of your restaurant and never come back. But Valentina, I've lost everything. My job, my apartment, my relationship, whatever family connections I had. You're literally the only person I know who's built something stable and successful. He leaned forward in his chair. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to forget what I did or pretend we're friends. I'm asking for an opportunity to prove that I can show up, work hard, and keep my mouth shut. I need this job to survive, and you need workers. It could be purely transactional. I considered his request. Every rational part of my brain said to turn him away. He'd proven himself to be unreliable, dishonest, and manipulative. He'd caused immeasurable harm to my family relationships, even if those relationships had been toxic to begin with. But another part of me, the part that remembered what it felt like to be desperate and alone, felt something that might have been compassion. If I hire you, I said slowly, it would be as a dishwasher, minimum wage, no special treatment, no exceptions for tardiness or attitude problems. You'd report to Marcus, my kitchen manager, and if you give him even one moment of trouble, you're gone immediately. Hope flickered in his eyes. I understand. You'd be on probation for 90 days. After that, if you've proven yourself reliable, we can discuss moving you to food prep or serving. But Kieran, if you steal one penny, lie about one thing, or cause drama with any of my staff, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure every restaurant in Sacramento knows exactly why you're unemployable. He nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely, whatever you need. One more thing. Tyler and I are engaged. He visits regularly, and sometimes he helps out during busy periods. If you have any problem with that, any lingering resentment or jealousy, speak up now so I can save us both the trouble. Kieran's face went pale, but he shook his head. No problems. Tyler's a good guy. He always was. I was just too screwed up to see it. I pulled out a new hire packet from my desk drawer and slid it across to him. Fill this out completely. Background check. references, tax information, all of it. You start tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Marcus will train you on dishwasher procedures and kitchen safety protocols. Thank you, he said quietly. Valentina, I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand what I took from you, what we took from you, and I'm grateful that you're still willing to give someone like me a second chance. I'm not giving you a second chance, Kieran. I'm giving you an opportunity to earn a first chance at being the person you should have been all along. After he left to fill out paperwork, I sat in my office thinking about the strange circularity of life. 3 years ago, Kieran had been the catalyst for the worst night of my teenage years. Now he was a broken man asking me for help, and I was in a position to decide his fate. The old Valentina, the people-pleaser who'd been trained to sacrifice herself for others' comfort, might have hired him out of guilt or some misguided sense of obligation. The new Valentina had hired him because I could afford to take the risk. Because my success was secure enough that one bad employee couldn't destroy what I'd built. Because showing mercy from a position of strength felt different than giving in from a position of weakness. That evening, Tyler called as I was closing up the restaurant. "How was your day?" he asked, as he did every evening when we couldn't be together. "Interesting. Kieran showed up looking for a job." Silence on the other end of the line. "Tyler, you there?" "Yeah, sorry, just processing. Kieran, really?" "Really?" "He's apparently homeless and desperate. I hired him as a dishwasher." "How do you feel about that?" I thought about it, like someone who's learned the difference between being compassionate and being a pushover. I can help him without endangering myself or compromising my boundaries. If he screws up, he's gone. If he doesn't, maybe he'll figure out how to build something better than what he had. And if seeing him every day brings up bad memories, then I'll deal with that too. But Tyler, those memories don't have power over me anymore. What happened that prom night led me here, to this life, to you. I'm not angry about it anymore. I'm grateful. Tyler was quiet for a moment. You know what I love about you? What? You've figured out how to be strong without being hard, how to be kind without being weak. Not everyone manages that. After we hung up, I walked through my restaurant one more time before locking up. Past the dining room where strangers became friends over Elena's recipes. Past the community board where local support groups advertised their meetings. Past the small stage where we hosted open mic nights for people who needed a safe place to share their stories. Tomorrow, Kieran would start washing dishes in my kitchen. In a few months, Tyler and I would be married at the small venue we'd booked downtown. Next year, Elena and I were planning to open a third location with an attached workshop space for boundary-setting seminars and family relationship counseling. I'd built all of this from the ashes of one terrible prom night and a family that had taught me to settle for less than I deserved. Sometimes the best revenge is a life so beautiful that your enemies ask if you're hiring. The girl who'd walked out of that hotel ballroom in a ruined dress wouldn't recognize the woman who locked up Sage and Time East that night. But she'd be proud of her, I think. She'd be proud of what we built in the silence they thought would bury us. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been the responsible one who's expected to fix everyone else's problems? Have you ever been told you're mature when really you're just being used? Have you ever walked away from people who claimed to love you but only valued your usefulness? If you have, I want you to know something. You're not selfish for wanting more. You're not ungrateful for setting boundaries. You're not disloyal for refusing to sacrifice yourself on the altar of other people's convenience. You're just finally learning what you're worth. And once you know that, you can build anything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.